It's not a personal attack. I'll make it a personal attack if you bring it up, though. Like, if I say something broadly about how motorcycles are objectively fucking bad, which they are, by the way, like they just are, they're just bad, you know, and you're gonna give me like a, you know, like a, well, no, actually, like, then of course, like, you're making yourself a bit of a target there, right? But like, I'm not gonna go to you out on the street and you're in a motorcycle and I'm gonna be like, wow, fuck you. Like, I don't know your life, but if you're gonna come at me on that. What is bad about them? Sure. Okay. Well, first of all, they're unnecessarily loud. Second of all, they're legally permitted to move irregularly. The shape of the motorcycle dictates its use in like a negative way, I think, in a deleterious fashion, you know? They're dangerous to the rider significantly. They can't, like, they have no utility the way that a car has. You can't really like carry groceries with a motorcycle. Let's be real here. Motorcyclists tend to be driven by douchebags. Like, okay, like, let's be fair. Let's be clear on this one. Motorcyclists die way more often than other motorists, and that might be like a good product of natural selection. Fuck motorcycle. Sorry, Mistress Lynn. Sorry about your son. Hope your son's all right. Hope your son stops riding. But fuck motorcyclists. Fuck them weaving between lanes. Fuck them and their loud-ass fucking, you know, mufflers or lack thereof. Holy shit. Drive a regular car or go on a bus. All right?
Like a lot of millennials, I kind of woke up politically after 8 years of Obama in the 2015-2016 timeframe when I looked at my country and said, what the fuck is going on here? I never had a cable subscription or anything, so where I went for political information was YouTube. It's actually what brought me to the platform in the first place. And one of the first people YouTube introduced me to was a man by the name of Stephen Kenneth Bonnell II, aka Destiny. Specifically, a conversation he had with a man named JonTron, who I still have seen almost zero content from, but apparently was some sort of comedy guy. The fact that people who were professional gamers and comedy YouTubers were now talking about politics, and I was realizing how much racist sentiment was like sitting right underneath the surface of these people was really illuminating for me.
Well, why shouldn't the white people be able to address this, but they're not allowed to because they're called racist by people like you?
If you wanted to fix crime in the United States, the best way to do it would be to deport all of the poor people, because poor whites commit a lot of crime too, disproportionately compared to wealthier whites.
That's just not true. But okay,
wait,
you can
hold on,
say
wait. You don't think that
Well,
poverty...
yeah, of course. Well, yes. In relative
terms,
to
yes.
in relative to wealthy whites, yes.
Sure.
You're correct.
Okay, so do you think that poor blacks probably commit more crime relative to wealthier black people?
They do. Wealthy blacks also commit more crime than poor whites. That's a fact.
Wait, what?
It is part of why I wanted to jump on the YouTube platform, is because I realized, man, people needed to be educated. Destiny is how I got first introduced to Vaush, as he was a community member going by the name Irish Laddie, who came on stream a couple of times. And what I liked about him was he spoke very confidently about leftist politics.
Like every time you go down a toy store and you see all that crap, that plastic, just that shit, you know, toy stores are full of shit. And you look down the aisles and you look on the shelves and you see all that crap. All of that is R&D development, factory work time, and material resources that could have been put towards stuff that actually matters and gone towards people who need it. And the only thing keeping that shit there is the profit motive.
This was a new thing to me that I didn't really understand, and I was interested to hear more, so when he started his own platform, I followed. From about 2019 to about 2022, I watched almost all of Vaush's YouTube videos. One of the lessons I got from watching years of debate stream content is that so much of it is just internet bullshit drama. Two people don't solve issues by yelling one sentence at each other back and forth. It comes from deep dialogue where you are getting to the root of problems. It's often clarifying miscommunication. It's often defining terms. It's also coming to a shared understanding and then moving forward from there on what is to be done. What I want to do is I want to take people who watch Vaush sincerely the same way that I did, with the intent to educate themselves and inform themselves and become a better person. Because I want to show you how confidently incorrect he can be about things that actually fucking matter to normal people in society, and how much of his own personal bias and lifestyle goes into how he speaks about things.
You do know, and I'm being real respectful here, about to say something very insulting. You know that like 99% of the guys you see in motorcycles are losers, right? They're like fat, balding guys in their 30s or older, sometimes with a much suspiciously younger woman behind them, you know, who doesn't look very happy to be there. They're like dads, or they look like it's like midlife crisis shit or whatever. I'm not saying all of them are, you know, it's just like that's the image they give. Vaush is not fucking with cool leather jacket guys. Yeah, you know why? Because they don't exist. I've been to biker bars, real biker bars. They're all in their fucking 50s and 60s, dude. They don't exist anymore. That era of people wearing with like the boots and the jeans and the leather jackets, that was an aesthetic. That was an era that is not being replicated anymore. Biker bars are almost exclusively occupied by regular ass people now, or older dudes. It's not cool. You're not free burning anymore.
So from one Vaush fan to another, I hope you will sit back, relax, and watch the show as I educate you on motorcycles to a depth that which you have never been exposed to, but is also important because it's going to give you a different lens to look at traffic management and so society through. Not one built from centering everything around the car, but one around keeping people alive.
All right, let me shift gears here for a second and say that I do in fact agree with a lot of what Vaush said in this hour-ish long video.
No reason cars shouldn't be limited to 80 max. I genuinely do believe that, by the way. I am a believer in that, 100%. The speed of traffic is dictated not by the speed limit, but rather, I'm not even a big speed limit enjoyer. I think that the speed limit should be determined by the design of the car and the design of the road, not by some arbitrary number that decides like how fast you can go. The most effective speed limit is designing a road that makes people feel best driving that speed, not like putting a number there that people have to deliberately obey. Statistically speaking, 100% of people who ride a motorcycle die.
I think a big reason me and Vaush differ in how we think about vehicles in the traffic management system is because our lifestyles are just really different. Vaush is a streamer, so I'm guessing he probably gets a lot more flexibility about when and how he chooses to commute on the roadways compared to people who work the 9-to-5 grind 40 hours a week like I do. I got my motorcycle license back in 2006 when I was working at Geek Squad in Anchorage, Alaska, and could only ride functionally for 6 months out of the year because the other 6 months there was snow on the ground. I converted away from cars as my primary form of transportation back in 2009 when I moved to the Vancouver, Washington area. And since that point, I've racked up like 200,000 plus miles on two-wheeled vehicles. I've ridden all sizes and styles of bikes at this point, but the vast majority of my experience is on 1,000cc street bikes, which I've used to commute to a full-time job through basically every condition you can imagine. I always loved riding bicycles, so motorcycles seemed like the obvious upgrade. And once I started riding motorcycles, I began to actively study riding techniques, mechanics, engineering, and physics. You know, I read books like Twist of the Wrist from motorcycle legend Keith Code, who was one of the first people to actually start documenting specific techniques that he learned from professional riders in order to share with the rest of us. I've completed more modern and up-to-date training programs like Champ U, which largely just validated lessons I've learned through my own experience, but it also taught me new ways to explain those techniques to other riders. I got my amateur race license last year and have spent lots of time interacting with motorcycle racers, even some at the highest levels of American motorcycle racing. Beyond just learning about bikes though, I've interviewed experts in the failures of our traffic management system like Jesse Singer, author of There Are No Accidents, and testified in support of bills that would improve motorcycle safety.
Oh, yeah, you want to see me? Hell yeah. Hey, I'm Alex. I'm a Seattle-based motorcycle rider, and I've been lane splitting on Washington roads in the way legalized by this bill for over a decade, and I've never crashed or gotten a ticket for it. Keeping lane splitting illegal is actively harming riders by preventing them from thinking more broadly about how they can ensure their safety on our roadways. Thanks so much for your opportunity to speak, and I am excited to legalize lane splitting and stop being worried about cops stopping me. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate it. David, please.
I'm still chuckling too.
I've gone 170 miles on our highways around here. I've crashed in almost no gear. I have fucked around, I have found out, and I have dedicated a lot of my life to teaching others the things that I learned along the way so that they can be safer and live better lives. This isn't to brag. This is just to explain why my conclusions are so different from the normie American understanding of motorcycles and danger, which Vaush demonstrated perfectly. Vaush understands some of the progressive and leftist talking points about urbanism. He does use the magic phrase, fuck cars. But it's clear his understanding is surface level, because if you think motorcycles are antisocial, you haven't really internalized how bad cars are for individuals and society.
You said bikes are louder than cars, how the engines are literally smaller? Because they don't have the same, like, infrastructure around the engine that can make it make less noise. Like, that's what a muffler is, right? Like, a muffler needs to be large and... Well, some car engines will be louder, but nothing revs like a motorcycle with the muffler made outside. Like, the engine's, like, right there, man. Like, in the car, the engine's, like, shielded, you know? There's, like, a muffler. It's in the fucking car.
I want to start this conversation with mufflers because that was at the top of Vaush's complaints. He spent more time talking about them than anything else, and it's the most clear example of him going off the rails about something that he has no idea what he's fucking talking about. The exhaust system of a motorcycle does reduce the noise of all the explosions coming from inside the engine, but it also adjusts the mixture of fuel and air going to the engine, increasing performance, improving fuel efficiency, and reducing wear on the motor. Since you get worse performance cutting off a muffler, what's more common is people getting a aftermarket system like this Hindle 3/4. These systems make the bike lighter and faster at the cost of capturing less emissions and being louder. Although a non-zero amount of people are going to have cut off their mufflers for the sound specifically and no other reason, this is what Vaush is hearing all the time and bitching about. If a sport bike is louder than the average, this is going to be the reason why. I only have the balls to take this off of this video because it fell off on the freeway while I was in the process of making this video. Coincidentally, I literally became the person that Vaush was bitching at people about. but for the not because I wanted to be, asshole. Oh, it's gonna get all over my fucking white clothes. Fuck. Fuck. This has got to go on here one way or another. To use some technology. After riding without a muffler for 30 seconds, I have no desire to do it ever again. For what it's worth, I hate how fucking loud mine is. To compensate for this, I do try to slow down in neighborhoods, minimize my revs. I coast as much as I can, especially in the early morning or late evening. I've worked a graveyard shift before, I get it. But if I saw a bike missing an exhaust, what I would guess would happen is that it got stolen or it got damaged and broken and fell off. You know, I wouldn't assume that they did it on purpose to be a fucking dickhead. I shouldn't have to tell Vaush this, but a lot of Americans don't have an emergency fund that they can just throw at shit that's not critical, you know? But man, when you live anywhere in the city, but especially if you live downtown or near the fucking highway, like, shit is just loud. And it is weird to pick motorcycles out of that crowd and say that they are an especially deleterious problem. I had to Google that word for this video. I had never heard that word before. Thank you, Vaush, for using new words. I am glad to have learned that and added that to my vocabulary.
Deleterious.
I like learning and growing. I recorded a bunch of places for this video, and I was often disrupted by loud noises, but almost 0% of them were motorcycles.
Car noise scientifically raises anxiety and aggression levels in a population. All animals respond to this high noise. Yes, 100%. Yeah. It's one of the reasons why people say city life is so anxiety inducing. It's what's the thing that Not Just Bikes always says? Cities aren't loud, cars are loud. And it's true. You know, you can go, Not Just Bikes has a video on a town that basically has like no traffic because of the way they've laid everything out and designed stuff. And the city is super fucking quiet, even in relatively dense areas. Because without cars, what's the loudest shit in a city, man? It's going to be like, what? People talking? What's the noise from? Birds?
The reality of city life is that it's kind of fucking loud. And it's loud for a lot of reasons. My bike is the loudest when it is going the fastest, and when it is going the fastest is when I am on the highway. Highways like I-5 here usually run right through the major cities because that's where we've chosen to put most of our sound pollution. Even cars without loud mufflers make a lot of noise because 4 wheels or more slamming over the ground over and over and over all day long is fucking loud. Highways are where semi-trucks go, those vehicles with 50,000 plus pounds and 18 wheels. These braking systems are also loud as shit. Oh yeah. Love that. Ah! Hold on. Listen to that bus. Beautiful sound of public transit. You know, some people convert from bicycles to motorcycles, but for the most part, people are converting to motorcycles from cars. People that swap to a motorcycle are part of the solution in a city. They are reducing their overall noise and pollution output. They are shrinking themselves, and they are making more space for other people on the roadway. So when I see people like Vaush go off on motorcycles, it indicates to me that there's something else at the core of this issue. And unlike other internet people whose closest brushes to violence are when people dox them, motorcycle riders experience real violence in the real world. That's why I find this nonchalant attitude that people like Vaush have towards calling for violence against motorcycle riders to be really disgusting. Let me show you how his words and attitude manifest in the real world.
Like, everyone hates you. Quit being selfish. You live in a community, in a society. I'm not joking. Quit being selfish. Nobody likes you. You're like the motorcyclists who take the mufflers off, so everyone within a quarter mile is subjected to deafening noises purely to signal to everyone that you have a tiny penis. Like, stop.
In the current online politics culture, there are a lot of sarcastic calls to violence. You know exactly what this looks like. Say a shitty opinion and then add, in a video game. Like, that's just some universal way of transforming an irresponsible statement into a funny joke. I think all that's pretty cringe because this is not how people who are mentally prepared to commit violence actually talk. It's just edgy internet shit. And that's why I generally don't give a fuck when I hear it. But Vaush's rant was different in a couple of ways.
I really do think that it's in large part due to like social anomie, because I really think that in a functioning society, any motorcyclist who removed their muffler, once they had to stop at a red light, they actually would be like beaten by a mob. Okay, so some people might think I'm exaggerating here because I often do. I want to make it clear that I'm not. I actually think that in a functioning society, you're removing the muffler from a motorcycle is a deliberate decision that does nothing but cause hearing damage to people. It's literally, what if for no reason I made everyone around me upset? You know, like genuinely, I genuinely think that in a functioning society, it would be met with like some degree of like violent response. Like it's insane to me that like the cities don't crack down on that. You know, those people should be arrested.
First, and as we just went over, calling for violence against motorcycle riders when you clearly don't understand motorcycles or the traffic management system is a pretty fucking shitty thing to do. Second, he expressly stated that this wasn't a joke. And you can say, well, that's just another layer of sarcastic meta humor. But like, at what point do you have to actually own the fucking things that you say?
My wife had her eardrum ruptured from no muffler. She was in a tunnel and he revved right next to her when she had the window open. Holy shit, X-Steady. I'm so sorry to hear that. Jesus fucking Christ. Immediate violence? Yeah, that's like a draw on the motorcycle next to you with your fucking car gun moment right there. Holy shit.
But what saps all the humor about this situation for me is that I've had like a dozen people initiate violent conflict on me using their cars and their guns and justifying it by saying that my behavior on my motorcycle was dangerous. The most famous one was when a detective drew his gun on me while I was just sitting in traffic waiting to go to work back in 2017.
How you doing?
Oh shit! What are you doing to me?
What do you mean? What am I doing?
What are you?
Fucking driver.
Hi, why do you have a gun on me? I'm unarmed. I will pull over. I'm unarmed.
Take your ID right now.
I'm going to
take your ID out. You move this bike, I'm gonna dump you.
If you're looking for the logic and why he snuck up from behind me and pointed a gun at my chest, well, don't waste too much time because he's a cop and cops just make shit up. The real reason is that I sped past him in traffic. And so when he caught up to me at that stoplight, he decided that he was going to initiate his own personal scared straight program, which is why he drew his gun before he ever left his vehicle and why he never wrote me a ticket. He had no legal justification to do this. It was road rage, and the end result of it could have been me getting shot like happens every day with American police over nonviolent crimes that have no victims. I'm pretty cool, calm, collect in these situations because I've gotten a lot of practice with people using their cars or their guns to try to threaten me in the middle of traffic for their own selfish reasons. I talked about the step-by-step process I go through when I have these conflicts in a video I made last December after a firefighter chased me down in Christmas traffic and threatened to shoot me because I filtered past him at a stoplight. Riding a motorcycle to the front of stopped traffic like this is called filtering, and it's an extremely safe and simple riding strategy. I'm going to get more into techniques like filtering and lane splitting later, but understand that right now this is illegal in my state of Washington, but it's going to be legal in 6 states as of 2025, and it's an extremely common practice in most of the world.
You're fucking a piece of shit.
Hey, how's it going, man?
Yeah.
Oh, you gonna shoot me? Oh, you gonna come at me? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do, man? Hey, are you mad because I'm in the cold and you're in your fucking car alone just chilling? Is that why you're mad? Are you mad because I just passed you in traffic and that's all that happened? Because literally nothing else happened. Nobody died. Everything's fine. Isn't that wild?
These people mask their aggressive actions with paper-thin justifications that fall apart under the lightest scrutiny. And when I called this dude out on it, he showed his true colors.
You should get a motorcycle. They're so much faster. You don't really need to sit in this, these are expensive. They consume, you're burning up the fucking road, you know? It's really pretty selfish to sit in the car, really. To drive alone in a car. What are you doing? Are you getting groceries? You going to work?
Yeah.
It's funny because it's really impotent. You can't do anything. You're going to record. I hope you upload this to TikTok and give me a whole bunch of views. People are going to love me.
Some people in this country have a mentality that riding a motorcycle is the equivalent to cheating the traffic system instead of working around it. These negative emotions are amplified by the psychology of being in a car, which makes us feel less vulnerable than those who are outside of one. This makes motorcycle riders lightning rods for the most unhinged people out there on our roads. What's at the center of every insincere complaint about motorcycles in this country is just crabs in a bucket mentality.
The only thing a crab is good for is holding back other crabs. Crab is like, if I'm gonna die, we all gonna die.
Or the more nuanced way that my buddy Phil described it, which is that
American culture is predicated on the crippling fear that someone, somewhere, is getting something they don't deserve.
In cars, you get stuck in these shitty situations where you're powerless to do anything, like traffic. And that can build resentment in people where they see others avoiding that misery, even if they had to accept a totally different set of trade-offs to do so. These people are one of the reasons why I make sure I am always moving forward on the roadway, never stopping and giving an opportunity for people to use me as an outlet for their anger. When I tell these stories, the most frustrating response I get is people saying, hey, just drive by the rules and everyone will leave you alone.
Stop breaking the law, asshole!
Setting aside that this is victim blaming and telling me that I need to be in charge of managing other people's emotions on the roadway when I'm just doing my best to get to fucking work, you need to understand that there is no amount of just follow the rules that is going to eliminate these conflicts on our roadways. And I will demonstrate with one last deadly story. In 2018, I interviewed a rider named Bree, who was riding her motorcycle during rush hour traffic from Seattle to Tacoma when an older man got out of his SUV and initiated a conflict with her. She wasn't breaking any laws or driving in a way a car wouldn't.
at 25, 30, leave space so I don't have to downshift and then upshift again and then downshift and then stop. And so I just like to leave plenty of room in front of me so I can just roll. I mean, anyone with a manual car or a motorcycle knows you off some leaving space so you're not stopping and going. We come back to another stop and then I leave another gap, and at this point he is no longer okay with me leaving that gap. Like, he gets boom right on my rear tire. Like, he is right there, at least 2-3 feet behind me. And so I take off and he stays with me, right on me. He's in the shoulder and he is jerking his car at me. Our lane comes to a stop. Drop my bike into neutral and look back. As I'm looking, I see in my mirror and I see a fucking door. The door is ajar. The door's open and I turn like this and he is fucking right there.
The conflict culminated with him taking her to the ground and getting on top of her, at which point she grabbed her concealed pistol from under her jacket, pointed it at him, fired one shot, leading him to lay on the ground and die right next to her.
We're waiting now to find out if charges are going to be filed after a road rage incident shut down several lanes of I-5 last night and during rush hour. Troopers say that a female motorcyclist and a male driver pulled over near the King-Pierce County line. They got into some sort of argument, then it turned physical, and at some point shots were fired, and the man ended up dead.
You know, there's a lot of road rage in this area, especially with all the construction and the traffic. It's pretty bizarre to have it end in such a horrible way as this.
Bree was very fortunate to not be killed or locked up after that situation, but trauma follows you forever.
Probably more personal than I would like to be. I did actually have to admit myself in because of everything that was going on with things people were saying, like it, and just the thoughts in your head. It definitely makes you not kind of want to be here and deal with that kind of stuff. And so I had to submit in for to be put on suicide watch because I wasn't in my right mind or to know what was going on with my body, because I didn't know why I was crying. I didn't know why I was feeling angry. I didn't know why I couldn't. I was sleeping 16 hours a day.
As a 38-year-old man who can do handstand push-ups, owns several guns, and years of experience dealing with these situations on the road, I am pretty confident in my ability to handle these people.
Are these guys gonna hurt us, Walter?
No, Donnie. These men are cowards.
But the motorcycle community as a whole is incredibly diverse and filled with people like Bree, who also have to deal with this dangerous reality for motorcycles in America. Hopefully it's crystal fucking clear why I think even jokingly suggesting that people use guns against loud motorcycle riders on the streets the way that Vaush did is a completely irresponsible statement from a public figure. Vaush clearly has a hyper focus on motorcycle sounds in an environment filled with things that are as bad or worse. And he doesn't even seem to understand the basics of why a motorcycle would be loud. So aggressive and violent rhetoric isn't just antisocial behavior, it's fucking dangerous.
Grow up. I'm sorry, dude.
All right, let's zoom out and go back to the next major complaint that Vaush had, related to how people ride motorcycles. My goal by the end of this is to have you appreciating everybody who chooses to ride a motorcycle, regardless of how loud they are. And I'm going to give you as many compelling reasons as I can think of to switch to one yourself.
Vaush, because of you, I sold my car. I'm so much happier, less bills, less parking, and the ability to meet people in public transit. Yeah, no, I genuinely, if your city can accommodate it, I genuinely think in a lot of cases, or having a car that you basically never use, you know, that just like sits in your garage or in front of your garage, and for the most part, you don't use it, you know? Though it obviously varies. Like, if you can get away with not having a car, it's great.
The cost of owning and maintaining a car is one of the biggest expenses for working class Americans, contributing to their inability to save money for things that would make their lives better or just help them weather emergencies. The average price for a car sold in 2023 was $47,000. That's more than I made a year until I was in my mid-20s. My top-of-the-line luxury performance motorcycle cost half that. In 48 states, you're required to find a private, for-profit company to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars a year to do literally nothing unless you have a severe crash. And if they do cover it, you've still got to pay the deductible, which is going to be hundreds or thousands of dollars. But don't worry, the insurance companies will jack up your rates to get that money on the back end. You also have to pay taxes in a variety of forms: licensing, registration, parking, gas, tolls. all of which are theoretically used to maintain the roadways, but don't worry, we're going to come back to that one. Speaking of maintenance, cars need a fuck ton of it, with the most common stuff being oil, brakes, filters, tires, belts, coolant, fuses, shit like that. There's an entire industry built around keeping millions of cars on the roads functioning, costing even more money and taking up space. You can save money by buying an older car, but eventually something major is going to break on every vehicle, and you're going to need to decide if you front thousands of dollars to repair it or buy another car. I've got a beater truck to trailer my bikes, take my pets to the vet, and haul shit occasionally, which I paid about $7,000 for. The water pump started leaking less than 2 years later, and the only place that would touch a 99 Toyota was the dealership. And getting that repaired ended up costing me another $10,000. Okay, sure, cars are really expensive, but at least they're really fun to use, right? Right?
Like they have no utility the way that a car has. You can't really like carry groceries with a motorcycle.
This is my backpack. How do you carry stuff on a motorcycle? Motherfucker, I do all my grocery shopping on my motorcycle. Not all of it, just a lot of it. Go more often. What more do you need?
Regardless of how much you spend on a car, the reality of using them on American roads is a frustrating and tedious experience. So many roadways are grids of stoplights and stop signs separated by straight highways that are mind-numbingly boring to drive when they aren't packed with cars. But they often are, and sitting in traffic is an excruciatingly miserable experience, especially if you don't have enough money to afford a nice car. Single occupancy vehicles take up an unnecessary amount of space and increase traffic more than anything else. As traffic increases, so do collisions and conflict between drivers, amplified by the way cars impact our mental state. Like in traffic, you are stuck on the road in your car until other people let you leave. That's a terrible feeling. Cars make you feel isolated, less connected to your environment and the other people in it, which amplifies negative emotions that become violent actions that are made more dangerous by being in control of a 1 to 6 ton piece of heavy machinery. When I lived in Everett and worked downtown Seattle, I had a 25-mile commute each direction. So I did the math between how long it took me on my motorcycle versus the car to see how much time I was saving. I worked 5 days a week, and the trip averaged 50 minutes a day each direction in the car, but was about 35 minutes on my motorcycle. So that's 15 minutes saved each direction, 30 total, multiplied by 260 working days a year, then divide that by 60 to convert it into hours, and then divide that again by 24, and you get 5 whole days a year I saved just by riding a motorcycle. 5 more days a year is a lot more time hanging out with my partner, assisting with domestic chores, walking the dog, or just educating myself.
I just don't get why anyone would want to ride one, man. It's not going to get you there that much faster. You're just bored. Put on a podcast, you know?
Vaush telling people who are just trying to find ways to cut down the week or so a year they waste commuting, just listen to a podcast, is fucking insulting. And it demonstrates how detached from the lived experiences of millions of working class Americans he is. Wasting your hard-earned time, money, and making you feel less free would be bad enough to justify the fuck cars mantra. But they might also kill you. We've established that cars are expensive and shitty to use. So why do people do it? Well, there's at least one big lie I hear people tell about motorcycles all the time that I think is the biggest reason people stick with cars. So let me dispel that next.
You know when you're driving down the highway late at night and you're going 80 miles an hour because fuck the police, but you're like holding 80 and you're fine at 80 and the rest of the cars are going 80, and then you hear behind you and some freak going 126 miles an hour, like fucking swerving through the consistent traffic, you know? Vaush, I'm that freak not lying. That's crazy. Fuck you. Fuck you. What's wrong with you, dude? Get your thrills somewhere else, okay? man, go fuck a girl or something. Stop getting your thrills from that. Find a constructive outlet.
Regardless of the benefits to the rider or society, the general narrative about motorcycles is that they are far more dangerous than cars. The logic this lens is built from isn't compatible with building a safe society for all road users. I'm going to tell you the story about Seattle police officer Kevin Dave, who has his car to thank that he is alive today. Officer Kevin Dave responded to a 911 call for someone who said that maybe they were overdosing on cocaine. Was Officer Kevin Dave racing against time to save the life of an overdosing drug user? No. He was going there to be an escort for the ambulances and fire that do in fact do the EMT work. Was there something that made Officer Kevin Dave believe that if he didn't get there immediately, somebody's life would be in danger? No. Is there any particular reason that this incident seemed like it would escalate into violence? No, and stop asking questions. And something violent did happen, but it didn't happen to the person who called 911. Officer Kevin Dave accelerated his patrol car up to 74 miles per hour on this street right here. And he hit Jaahnavi Kandula at this crosswalk, killing her. Officer Kevin Dave did everything he could to ensure he didn't hurt anybody with his actions, including turning on his lights and his sirens, and Ms. Kandula's death is just an unfortunate accident, a confluence of mistakes on her part. Kandula caused her own death by failing to correctly estimate the officer's speed, which was almost triple the limit, and by not wearing her full face helmet and was instead just wearing AirPods, which is incredibly irresponsible behavior if you're going to be anywhere near the roadway or crossing it. Are you crossing the roadway? The truth is that if Officer Kevin Dave was riding a motorcycle that night, nobody would have died. He would have either missed her or she would have been able to dodge a vehicle that was 1/5 the size. But the real reason Kandula would be alive today is because Officer Kevin Dave would not have been driving at 74 miles per hour if he was on a vehicle like that. Because he wouldn't have felt safe. He would have realized that this was entirely possible. He could have hit someone and that could have killed him as much as that person. And we just operate differently when we're not protected from our mistakes. Cops, guns, and cars. 3 incredibly dangerous things that come together thousands of times every day with extremely predictable and deadly results. Okay, so hopefully I have made my point that to look at motorcycles and say that's more dangerous than the car requires you to basically laser focus in on the safety of the driver to the exclusion of everyone else.
Exceeding the speed limit is a mistake or a bad decision, whatever way you want to characterize it. But whether or not you die while exceeding the speed limit, that's a matter of the conditions you faced. The nature of the road, the nature of your vehicle, the nature of the other vehicles on the road. Much of traffic engineering is based on manuals written in the 1940s and 50s when this country was heavily invested in building highways all across the country. So not only was it based on limited data and poor data collection, it was based on highways, where like most of the time when you or I are going to get killed on the road on a bike or walking or on a motorcycle, it's in an intersection. It's in an urban or suburban environment that's full of conflict. It's not just getting people from point A to point B at the same time.
When you analyze all the predictable and so preventable traffic deaths each year, it's impossible to ignore how much destruction cars create. 90% of motorcycle deaths are the rider. Cars kill tens of thousands of people every year on top of the millions that are injured. And that's spread between the driver, passengers, people in other cars, and people just existing on the roadway like Jaahnavi. Cars are bought and sold almost entirely on the safety and the comfort of the driver, and not the people that are going to be around that driver when they inevitably make a mistake. Nobody can drive perfectly all of the time. Even professional racers at the top of their game will tell you that they almost never have a perfect lap. And even small errors behind the wheel of a car can lead to devastating harm. It's easy to forget about all this danger because cars are advertised based on their onboard Wi-Fi and leather seats and fucking giant touchscreens. The latest and greatest convenience feature, which used to be talked about as a safety feature, is automation. No, the real selling point for automation was always going to be about paying less attention to the roadway and letting a computer handle the driving. See, that way you're totally free to play on your phone, watch a movie, take a nap, anything but drive the fucking car.
New at 11, have you heard about this guy or have you even seen him? He says it's a magical experience and he's going to keep doing it. We hear from the Tesla driver who chooses actually not to drive at all. Instead, he puts the car in autopilot and there you see him. He sits in the back seat.
What's up, bro? You really like that? You really like it back there?
Yeah, so I feel safer back here than I do up there.
Well, what about for other people if something happens to the
I can control it like this.
So that's how fast you can get to the wheel?
Yeah, feel me? That's how fast I can get to the wheel. And if anything else, you feel me, go like, whoop, whoop. Whoop, whoop. Shout out Elon Musk. You feel me?
Rich fuckheads like Elon Musk are obsessed with pushing self-driving technology onto society as fast as possible because they don't want to have to drive their fucking cars, and they hate interacting with people because he's a shitty person. And so the only way he can get people to interact with him is if they want something from him.
New Tesla, FSD package. Here, the boombox is so the pedestrians can hear the car and get away from it. Here, I could control the climate and all that from my phone, and it's like a living room back here. Have you ever met him? No, I want to meet him.
They don't care if the technology isn't ready or if people are getting hurt on the roads. It's what they want, and so the rest of us are just gonna have to fucking deal with the consequences.
I have unlimited money to blow on Teslas. Like, if you take my Tesla away, I will get another Tesla. Yeah, that's how it works. I run Silicon Valley. Don't trip. I know what I'm doing. I got bars. And my car will stop for you. Like, my car stops for pedestrians, bicycles, red lights, everything. Like, Teslas do not crash. We're going to put all the Uber drivers out of business. Elon Musk is going to be moving United States of America, and it's going to be beautiful.
Self-driving cars are another example of a dangerous condition that uniquely impacts motorcycle riders, like Jeffrey Neeson, who died just recently and lived right up north of me when a Tesla in autopilot smashed into him from behind at like 3 fucking p.m. in the afternoon.
Full of life and love. That's how Matthew and Janessa described their brother, Jeff. Jeff was riding his motorcycle on State Route 522 when a car hit him from behind and killed him. The driver said he was in autopilot in his Tesla and not paying attention. According to records, he said he was distracted by his phone, and the next thing he knew, there was a bang and the vehicle lurched forward as it accelerated and collided with the motorcycle in front of him.
He just loved riding his bike everywhere. That was his pride and joy.
They say one of the only things he loved more than his bike was being an uncle, coaching his nephew's football team, and always being present.
Automation hasn't made cars safer. It's just added more unpredictability to the roadways. And it's another clear example of people in charge creating the traffic management system failing to protect vulnerable road users.
So autonomous vehicles are totally unregulated by and large. NHTSA has just like taken a step back. And they're like, we don't want to stifle technology, but really they just don't want to stifle corporate wealth in any way. But these vehicles were sold on the promise that the real problem was drivers. They would often cite this statistic, which has now been wholly debunked, that 94% or 96% of traffic crashes are caused by human error. And like, essentially it's like a misinterpretation of a US DOT study, but like that was the idea. They were like, this is why we need robot cars, because the problem is the drivers. But of course the problem is the system.
When systems fail, people look for alternatives, and car manufacturers are happy to provide solutions in the form of larger, more expensive vehicles, creating an arms race where people buy bigger and bigger cars to protect themselves from other people buying bigger and bigger cars. This is exactly what automakers want. A population of consumers who feel forced into a situation where they have to spend their money on a car. Motorcycle riders are breaking the cycle by shrugging off the fear, uncertainty, doubt, and taking ownership of their personal safety.
There's an insane thing we're seeing right now. You know, I talk a lot about the growing size of SUVs and pickup trucks, which have grown massively in the past 10 years, and that's really driving the pedestrian death crisis. And one of the things that's so tricky about it is that so automakers are selling fewer sedans. Automakers are pushing this idea. They want to sell bigger cars, but people are buying them. And I think they're buying them in part because they feel unsafe. And you feel safer when you're driving a tank and it's killing all these pedestrians. But like, you know, it is somewhat reasonable to understand why a person is saying, yeah, my family's in here though. Like, and that car's a tank next to me. So what am I going to do?
The studies used to justify the lens that motorcycles are more dangerous than cars comes from crash analysis datasets, which are loaded with bias and uncontrolled variables. The top level statistic that people repeat over and over is that fatality rates of motorcycle crashes is somewhere around 28 times higher than in cars. But these studies don't control for the quality, condition, or amount of gear riders are wearing, the nature of the crash as far as like speed, direction, angle, or the characteristics of a vehicle they might have collided with, all of which have a massive impact on the rider's survivability. Most of the data points in these studies come from police reports, and cops don't show up if you crash your bike unless you're really fucking hurt or you need them to write a report for insurance. Plenty of people wouldn't call a cop outside of those two conditions because they might write you a ticket as a fucking cherry on top. I've had over a dozen bike crashes. The worst was when I laid my R1M down last year wearing just a helmet and gloves. But that crash isn't going to be included in any of these statistics because I rode that bike away minutes later.
Police and traffic engineers are extremely indebted to the system as is. And the idea that the problem in the system is you and me and how many errors we make. Not that the system itself is inherently dangerous, because they are the literal designers and enforcers of the system. So for them to say something like lane splitting might be safer is on a traffic engineer's front, admitting that the street is inherently dangerous and thus you need to modify it, right? You need to do a workaround to operate in it safely. And admitting for the police that the enforcement of the rules is actually not the point, is actually not the thing that keeps us safe. So like you're talking about these two people who would have to admit that they are either useless or part of the problem.
Hopefully you get now that the cause of a fatal crash is not motorcycle. There's going to be a confluence of conditions that contributed to that crash. Poor road conditions, bad weather, vehicle malfunctions, distracted driving. These are causes of crashes. And since our data collection practices are so poor, all that can be said objectively is that if a car crash happens, the driver would have been less likely to survive if they experienced the exact same crash on a motorcycle. This is a very dishonest and ignorant way to conclude that motorcycles are more dangerous, because it's extremely possible that the exact same crash would never have happened if the driver was operating a motorcycle. The motorcycle is blamed as the cause of death because it's the tried and true misdirection to obscure the real reasons.
The only reason filtering hasn't been legalized is safety. And yes, there are studies to show how low-speed accidents increase when cars and motorcycles are in such close proximity. There are also studies that show how filtering decreases a rider's chance of being seriously injured, and even more statistics that prove that motorcycle accidents per capita are lower in the countries that allow filtering. My professional opinion is that anyone pulling safety conclusions from the current body of research might as well pull them from their ass.
So you might not know this, but car infrastructure is dangerous and expensive. Our roads are becoming less and less safe because in the mid-20th century, America pivoted its entire traffic management and legal infrastructure to centering around the car. And that single decision point has shaped our entire culture for the worse. A clear example of this is the Katy Highway in Texas, which is the widest roadway in the entire country. It's gotten bigger and bigger because the expectation is more lanes are going to reduce traffic and reduce commute times. And they did for a little bit, but eventually they rose right back up to where they were at before actually going higher than they were before the expansion. This is all public knowledge, and yet the future we are barreling towards is the one where we have traffic jams that can last literally days, just like what happened in China back in 2010.
But this August 2010 one on G110 is now believed to have been the worst traffic jam in world history. The congestion lasted for 60 continuous miles, and drivers were only able to move as little as 0.6 miles per day. It took some close to a week to make their way through this stretch of highway, a journey that would normally take an hour.
If you are even casually paying attention, you will notice that this country's infrastructure is fucking crumbling. These giant highways and structures are insanely expensive. And like cars themselves, they have a massive upfront cost, followed by huge maintenance costs that you have to keep doing or the shit fucking falls apart. I'm not the most diligent person at doing my own maintenance, but if my front brakes fail because I don't replace the pads, I'm the one who's fucked, not every American. We literally cannot maintain the road system that we've built because we're not collecting or allocating enough money to keep it safe.
For example, when a city wants to build a new road or freeway, usually less than a quarter of the funding comes from the city itself. The overwhelming majority comes from the Department of Transportation and other higher levels of government. The city may get it built for cheap, but the city is ultimately responsible for paying to maintain that infrastructure forever. The big problem begins if there isn't enough tax revenue collected to cover the replacement cost of the infrastructure. And that is exactly what has happened with car-dependent suburbia, because car-centric sprawl is horrendously expensive.
There's really only two scenarios where we actually put significant investment into our roadways. The first is to make the roads bigger so that you can put more cars on the roadway. And the other is after there's a critical failure that has devastating consequences to the community and the environment. This is a destructive cycle where we throw good money after bad, doing a half-assed job, maintaining the system as it exists today. And it takes resources away that we could use to build something better and safer. If this is all new to you, then you should go watch this Climate Town video, not just because it's great, but because Raleigh's such a silly little guy who won't respond to my emails asking him for an interview. What the fuck, man? I'm just kidding. I haven't actually emailed him yet, but if he sees this video, I'm coming for you. I feel so much more capable of navigating the hellscape that is American roads on my motorcycle than trapped in a box. And I'd love to show you why.
When I took my motorcycle license training course all those years ago, I came in with almost zero experience. I remember looking at the bikes we were going to learn on and thinking, oh, there's no seatbelt there. That might seem really dumb not to expect that. I mean, just imagine being strapped to a motorcycle as it's actively sliding across the road. Now, I was able to logic through that reason within a few seconds, but the number one safety tool emphasized for cars is a seatbelt. So I just kind of expected it to exist on a motorcycle. But the closest analogy is a helmet. This was my wake-up call to the reality that even though motorcycles operate on the same roads as cars, they really only share the most superficial similarities as far as controls, techniques, and strategies. We in the motorcycle community call this car brain, the tendency to assume that a motorcycle should operate like larger vehicles. And it's the first hurdle new riders have to overcome.
Perhaps it's unsurprising that people who drive boxes can't think outside of them.
To actually understand motorcycles, you have to leave behind a lot of burned-in car knowledge and learn totally new concepts, which are often unintuitive. Motorcycles operate more like bicycles than cars because they're both unitrack vehicles, two wheels in a straight line. To navigate a corner in a unitrack vehicle, you have to lean them over. And to initiate that lean, you have to turn the bars the opposite direction you want to be going with a technique called countersteering. Turn the bars left, leans the bike right, you go right. There's nothing in the car world like this. Most motorcycle crashes I see are because riders are using some of the same emergency techniques as cars, which in a lot of situations is limited to just hammering the brakes. And that can get you hurt or killed on bikes. The barrier to riding a motorcycle, as far as knowledge and skills, is a lot higher than in a car, which is why every rider will tell you that motorcycles made them safer when driving their car. Creating better trained, higher skilled drivers is one way that motorcycles increase overall traffic safety, but it also elevates the safety of the individual. People generally want to be safer, but this is a lot of work and taking on additional personal risk. And I think a reasonable question one might ask is, what makes a motorcycle worth it for me?
And then people say, well, it's fun to ride them. Like, man, I'm sure it is. I don't know if that should like validate an entire fucking basically obsolete line of motorcycle or of like motorist technology, right? I don't know.
I think one of the things that really separates us from the high primates is that we're tool builders. And I read a study that measured the efficiency of locomotion for various species on the planet. The condor used the least energy to move a kilometer. And humans came in with a rather unimpressive showing about a third of the way down the list. It was not too proud of a showing for the crown of creation. So that didn't look so good, but then somebody at Scientific American had the insight to test the efficiency of locomotion for a man on a bicycle. And a man on a bicycle, or a human on a bicycle, blew the condor away, completely off the top of the charts. And that's what a computer is to me. What a computer is to me is, it's the most remarkable tool that we've ever come up with. And it's the equivalent of a bicycle for our minds.
The baseline of a motorcycle is the highly efficient design of a bicycle, with locomotion powered by engines of various types. Their small size means they need less raw materials to construct, less room on the roads to operate, and less space in your garage to store. They're cheaper to buy with brand new high-performance motorcycles with all the bells and whistles like ABS starting at like $6K. Gas-powered motorcycles average between 50 and 75 miles a gallon, with some getting way more than that, and electric motorcycles get hundreds of miles in a single charge. I hated doing mechanical work on cars because they're so large and difficult to fix, whereas motorcycle components are super accessible and like erector sets in that you can fix almost all the common things with like 3 Allen wrenches. When I started working downtown Seattle 5 days a week, I was appalled that other people were spending $300 to $400 a month just to park their car, while I was getting free parking in all the garages that don't charge because I'm not even in a real spot. I would love to just not pay insurance at all, but at least my $23,000 sport bike only cost me $140 a year to insure, whereas my Toyota Tacoma is about 10 times that. Another bullshit thing you'll hear all the time is that reckless motorcycle riders crashing is what's increasing insurance premiums. Totaling out a motorcycle and paying medical expenses for one person is nothing by comparison to the destruction the average car crash is capable of. The total cost of ownership for motorcycles is a fraction of cars, which leaves way more money in your pocket, and that is an extremely effective way to reduce expenses and relieve financial stress. It's not just saving money, though. Motorcycles save you time by allowing you more flexibility in how you get place to place. American roadways that are designed to pack as many cars as possible on them are filled with gaps wide enough to fit smaller vehicles in. These techniques, lane filtering, splitting, and sharing, demonstrably reduce traffic, allow motorcycles to get off the dangerous roadways faster, lowers the chances a rider gets hit from behind by a Tesla, and gives bikes a better emergency option than slamming their brakes.
And when I first read the bill, I thought it was stationary also, and I had concerns about that, but I'm picturing a scenario. I'm on the highway, we're going down 25 miles an hour, I've got a kid in the back seat, they roll the window down, they stick their arm out, my kid ends up with a broken arm, the motorcyclist's guts end up all over the back of my car. It just doesn't seem to me to make a lot of sense. I'm sorry, it doesn't.
Ernie Adler again. Could we have Steve Guderian address that?
Transportation Committee. My name is Steve Guderian. I have an extensive history involved with motorcycles, from law enforcement to being the regional motorcycle safety expert for NHTSA, which besides being an expert in motorcycle rider safety, I'm also an expert in collision reconstruction with a specialization in motorcycles. And lane sharing, lane splitting, lane filtering, whichever term you would like to use, has been one I've been looking at since the beginning of about 2011. In Europe, lane sharing is a common practice for most all European countries. The biggest thing that I've found in talking with people is that they don't understand what the benefits of lane sharing are. And it removes me from a significant collision to a less severe collision that I have a high probability of not only staying on the motorcycle, but if I do go down, I'm going down at a much lower speed and I'm not going to have as severe of an interaction. NHTSA says that the most common crash for all vehicles on the roadway is the rear end crash, 28%. As a collision reconstruction expert, one of the things that got me interested in looking at lane sharing as a safety aspect was the fact that I know I don't want to be rear-ended on my motorcycle. That's a significant collision to me, even at low speed. If I'm between the vehicles, I have what's known as an incomplete contact. Because of the dynamics of the motorcycle, at the speeds we're talking about here, 30 miles per hour, it's very likely that I will keep my motorcycle upright.
Something I think is interesting, though, is how much people hate lane splitting. And I think this is like really telling, and it gets into something I talk about in the book, that it's like people hate lane splitting and these laws are never passing. And I think it's because we love to blame victims. And victim blaming makes us feel better in the face of tragedy, right? So you see a motorcyclist killed while lane splitting. It's a way to say blaming them and saying we shouldn't legalize lane splitting is a way to say that could never happen to me because I'd never fill in the blank. I'd never lane split. I'd never ride a motorcycle. And so legalizing lane splitting would take away people's ability to blame motorcyclists for their own deaths, Because if we admit that lane splitting can save lives and the data's there, we're admitting that the problem is the road system.
An extremely fundamental rule of safety for humans is that if you want to increase survivability of an impact, you encase the body in materials that can absorb the forces of that impact. Although I don't wear much PPE these days, I encourage riders to wear gear if it makes them feel safer and can afford it, because it objectively improves the survivability of crashes. And you can see how good modern gear is by watching bonkers crashes that MotoGP riders just walk away from. It was fucking insane watching Pecco Bagnaia high side get ran over and then race the next race like a week and a half later or whatever and get fucking third. The other reason I don't talk much about it is because selling motorcycle gear is like what runs the motorcycle content creation economy. And after spending a decade in retail, I am just fucking done selling things, you know? Oh, except for my community created stickers. You should go check those out. They're awesome. Crashing has more potential consequences than hurting you or death. It can cost you a lot of money, prevent you from riding a motorcycle for long periods, and even though gear objectively saves lives, no amount of it is 100% effective at that. This is how I developed the philosophy that skill is more important than anything else, because you survive 100% of the crashes you don't experience. More of the common wisdom I disagree with is sayings like, ride like everybody's trying to kill you. I think most drivers are pretty good, actually, all things considered, by the criteria that they operate their vehicles in a predictable way. There are plenty of cars on the road being operated by drivers that are drunk, high, or using their phones and driving at the exact same time without causing any issues. Driving a car is like using a regular Nintendo controller, which is why people feel safe doing other shit at the same time or driving with diminished capabilities. Riding a motorcycle, on the other hand, is like using an N64 controller, which is why some of those people end up dying when they try to do the exact same thing on bikes. This is why so many cars just find a spot in traffic and sit, like they were in lines at a grocery store. It makes it easy to just cruise with the flow of traffic with minimal attention on the driving task. I'm pretty sure this is also why some people tell stories about getting freaked out by a motorcycle passing them out of nowhere. They aren't really paying attention until a bike snaps them back into reality. A few months back, a guy by the name of Jixabra rode his motorcycle as fast as he could from Colorado Springs to Denver, hitting 170 miles an hour plus multiple times, and people commented about how drivers don't follow road etiquette, like staying right to pass. And this is why. Roads are wide enough and cars are predictable enough to the point where you can build your skills up to riding at 60 miles an hour over the speed of traffic and not have a collision. The proof this can be done over and over and over is in the sauce, because you can't get to Jixabra's level without doing this a lot. Now, some people are absolutely doing dangerous shit with their cars on purpose that could get themselves and everyone around them hurt, like playing hall monitor when I'm just trying to move around them in traffic. I encourage motorcycle riders who run into these people to just slow down, take a different route, change lanes, whatever it takes to avoid them safely. In my experience, these are always men, always driving alone, usually in an SUV or a truck, and I get off on putting these people in their place, so I make a little game out of getting around them. I should really stop doing this. It is absolutely not safe. But fuck those guys, right? What about cops, you might be asking? I mean, Jixabro was arrested after all. Cops do generally have a bias against motorcycle riders that could lead to more enforcement and run-ins, but I haven't gotten a ticket on my bike in over a decade. Want me to show you how?
Past a certain point in the speed limit, it gets difficult to deal with potholes, road obstructions, to turn quickly, something happens you're not aware of. Like, there's a reason for stuff like this. You know, you're not a NASCAR driver, and you never will be. You don't have the sauce. You suck. They're goated, you're not. You're like a sheep, so drive like it. Drive like a sheep.
If you survey the landscape of motorcycle content creators, what you'll notice is that I'm a bit of an outlier in that I emphasize building skills over buying protection. This is mainly because I don't like to be talked down to, and I don't like to be safety shamed. And both of those things have been such huge parts of American motorcycle culture, which is driven by car brain. I do not want to interact with the police if I can avoid it. And that's another reason I ride a motorcycle, because it makes me feel safe from the police. Now, when I say that, lots of people make a funny face because it sounds like a contradiction, right? And it is if you respect the criminal justice system or think you actually have to participate in it fully. If you watch Vaush, hopefully you already understand that we have a two-tier justice system in this country with plenty of people who do openly illegal things and are never held accountable for it. Cops use the powers entrusted them by the government to break traffic laws and get away with more serious crimes like domestic abuse and even murder. Politicians that make up the government are also immune because they write the laws that the cops enforce. They can either use their power and influence to convince cops not to prosecute them, or they can just make it so that the shit that's illegal for us is legal for them. Nancy Pelosi's husband has made fuck tons of money off of the information that his wife has given him that she got from closed-door meetings with political leaders and business leaders. For you and me, that's called insider trading and front-running. That's serious shit. And of course, everyone knows that rich people just buy themselves out of problems by throwing armies of lawyers at their issues or by buying off politicians to change the laws in their favor. I see absolutely no reason to abide by the rules of an openly corrupt criminal justice system. So, like the cops, the politicians, and the wealthy, I only follow it up to the point that it can enforce its laws onto me. Benjamin Franklin once said that time is money. But there's a lesser-known quote from a Russian author named Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky. Money is coined freedom. Don't come at me for my fucking Russian pronunciation, assholes. I did the best I could.
Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky.
I can't write the laws to prioritize my needs over other people's like the politicians do. I don't have the money to buy myself out of legal issues like rich people do. And I don't have the structural power to do illegal things without consequences the way that the cops do. I can afford a motorcycle, and my motorcycle can give me access to levels of freedom normally reserved for those in power, gained by exploiting others. Traffic enforcement is the #1 way that people interact with the police. My motorcycle prevents me from needing to interact with cops doing traffic enforcement because they're in giant SUVs that can't follow me through tight spaces. And those officers will never be as good a driver as me because they just do not get the practice going 140 that I do. Motorcycles save me time, they save me money, and they make me more free. There is a trade-off to all the extra freedom that motorcycles do give you, which is personal responsibility. And saying that motorcycles are somewhat self-selecting is pretty true because confident drivers are going to find themselves tested, and they will see if they do, in fact, have the sauce.
Mr. Slynn, yeah. Statistically speaking, 100% of people who ride a motorcycle die. So I hope that I hope your son stops. I have a very negative perception of motorcycles. I'm sorry. I don't like them. Do off-roading stuff if you want.
We've talked about how our streets are more dangerous because of this terrible cycle where car-focused infrastructure pressures people into centering their lives around car transportation, making other forms like motorcycles more dangerous. But the vast majority of motorcycle crashes do not lead to a fatality, and instead, riders learn lessons about how to operate their motorcycle more safely, predict traffic better, and the limits of their skills. I have no doubt that many people watching my clips, regardless of my history and all the things I've explained so far in this video, will believe that I operate my motorcycle recklessly because they don't understand how skilled you can become at something with 100% focus and dedication to learning and growing. With my experience, I will do things that other riders won't do because they think they're too dangerous, like split lanes. But I don't do things that other riders think are really safe, but actually add a lot of risk. One of the most popular motorcycle accessories is handlebar mounts for phones so that riders can see visual navigation, change songs, make phone calls, see their notifications, do any number of things. I have never used one of these because to ride like I do requires my full attention, and I don't even want to open the door to the possibility that my ADHD brain could lose focus on the driving task to look at a notification because that's the most likely way I die. They're also notorious for destroying people's phones by either failing at high speeds or by breaking the electronics inside by transferring all the forces happening on the bike that make it vibrate to the phone. It shakes the inside of that thing like a crying baby. With my full attention on riding, I can ensure that I am safely moving forward at all times, completely eliminating the possibility I could get hit from behind and training myself to always be seeking open space in front of me to go to in an emergency. This is why I use my brakes far less than the average rider when unexpected things happen, and instead accelerate into open spaces without worrying about if I'm breaking the law. Educating myself on motorcycle physics, mechanics, techniques, and maintaining my full attention on the driving process the entire time I'm operating the bike is how I take personal responsibility of my safety. There's no magic to why I feel safe riding the way I do on the roads. I have done the work because it gives me so much more personal freedom. Dangerous drivers are a risk to themselves and others, regardless of what vehicle you put them behind. So why would you encourage them to get one that's far more likely to kill other people with their mistakes? If we wanted to make safer drivers, we would require or at least encourage people to ride a motorcycle first. That would be a truly radical step towards improving our society. And maybe then we can finally start building out infrastructure that's focused on improving motorcycle, bicycle, and pedestrian safety.
There's like let's be clear here, okay? Motorcyclists die way more often than other motorists, and that might be like a good product of natural selection. Fuck motorcycle. Sorry, Mistress Lynn. Sorry about your son. Hope your son's all right. Hope your son stops riding. But fuck motorcyclists. Fuck them weaving between lanes. Fuck them and their loud ass fucking mufflers or lack thereof. Holy shit! Drive a regular car or go on a bus. All right. Why are you driving around a motorcycle? You're not cool. All right.
Don't worry. I've said about everything I want to say about motorcycles for this video. I'm going to start wrapping up. I want to clarify first, though, that there are lots of people who can ride like I do, but it's the vast minority of riders. Everyone on a motorcycle knows that they aren't as protected as in a car. And so what tends to happen is that people ride to their ability.
Most of the time what we find out with riders is that they tend to ride to what they feel is safe for their ability. And if they're not comfortable with lane sharing, they won't. New, old, or anything in between. If they are comfortable with it, they will.
As you gain skill, you ride more safely and confidently, leading you to begin taking more calculated risks like lane sharing. But most people develop their skills through normal riding to the point where they feel safe enough on the roads and then never take any additional training, which leads their motorcycle expertise journey to end. Lots of people never evolve past the car brain, which is why so many old motorcycle riders feel extremely confident giving out advice and safety lectures to people like me. But it doesn't take getting to my level of skill to enjoy the benefits of additional time, money, and freedom that motorcycles provide. And that's why people fall in love with them. I run a Discord server with almost 2,000 people in it, where the primary goal is to make the broader motorcycle community more diverse. Motorsports are traditionally male-dominated spaces, but my community leans towards queer riders and especially trans riders, like my Moto America qualified girlfriend. She's faster than me on the track with a bike that has nearly half the horsepower. This is what led me to feeling a lot of cognitive dissonance watching Vaush, as I slowly realized that he didn't believe in the leftist principle of equality in the way that I did. It began to feel like he was exploiting marginalized people for his personal gain, which is a capitalist mindset. That's what the wealthy, the political, and the police do to gain their additional freedom. Of course, Vaush isn't the only one doing this by a mile. It's a massive problem with social media platforms that elevate content that increases conflict over substance. But he does do it a lot. And the last time I saw it happen before I unsubscribed, he was shitting on a marginalized community that was especially close to my heart.
So about a year ago, I said, very wisely, very sensibly, all J.K. Rowling had to do was shut the fuck up and she could have been almost uncritically beloved for like a century. Okay? And then I followed it up with women be quieter and start apologizing challenge. So obviously, that is a misogynistic tweet. Kind of hard to argue around that one. I would argue that it's a very obviously like a light misogyny.
I called him out, tweeting, "Doing edgy, ironic misogyny while defending trans people magnifies the grain of truth in what TERFs say about there being misogyny in trans activism."
I stopped watching Vaush after he had an interaction with someone who inspired me to be a better creator and a better person. ContraPoints. It wasn't even what Natalie said about him that led me to stop watching Vaush. It was the way he reacted to her critique that I felt demonstrated a clear lack of character. If I hadn't spent so much time at that point talking to trans people and paying attention to the higher level conversations being had about them, I might not have fully understood the significance of her statements or why Vaush's response was so fucked up. After I made a video explaining why, as a lifelong athlete, I would rather see us change sports or the mentality around them than exclude trans people from them, I learned a lot about the reasons people had specifically against allowing trans women to compete with cis women in sports. Most of the comments expressing anger that trans women's advancements in society, like becoming more visible, supported, and accepted, came at the cost of cis women's rights, when in actuality, the entirety of women's rights was growing as a whole. Engaging with those comments made it very clear that these people didn't give a single shit about women's rights, and in fact had a very low opinion of what women were capable of. The clearest example of this is a movie I would absolutely never fucking waste my time watching, but you can find 1 million reviews of, called Lady Ballers.
In a world where women's sports is being transformed, the Daily Wire calls foul with the most triggering comedy of the year.
Sports can be your pathway to a better life.
Well, like yours?
Please don't steal my catalytic converter again.
Even though these arguments are incredibly dishonest, the people making them understand that the core nugget of protecting women is very persuasive, especially to people who casually pay attention to this stuff or don't know any trans people. And that brings us back to what Vaush did. Let's look at it from the lens of someone who doesn't understand these deep nuances of the conversation and instead just sees it casually on Twitter. Vaush is a man who is nominally on the left somewhere, telling J.K. Rowling, a cis woman, that she needs to shut up in response to her arguments that trans women come at the sacrifice of cis women. This is Contra's critique, and Vaush agreed that it was misogynist, so I expected this to end with him humbling himself for a moment, apologizing, and adjusting his behavior going forward. And if that was what happened, I would be totally happy to move past it. But what actually happened was he ran to his platforms to make excuses and attack her. First he said, that's not that big a deal.
You weren't defending the misogyny, correct? Well, no, my argument with the misogyny thing is that I don't care. I don't think that I've said anything more misogynistic than what Contra's said.
He complained that she didn't bring these things to him privately, failing to understand that it's not her responsibility to protect his image, ego, or waste her time with someone who has a reputation for doubling down on the shitty things he does.
It did bother me when I saw these tweets from Contra because, like, I don't know. She'd been on my stream like twice or 3 times before. I feel like if you have an issue with something I've said, you could tell me, like, I don't know, directly, but...
He said it's okay that he does it because Contra makes jokes about women. Apparently not understanding the difference in poking fun at your own identity versus the identity of other marginalized people.
But I feel like Contra often makes kind of light, self-deprecating, misogynistic jokes. This is something trans women will do a lot, where when they make a mistake, they'll do like a, oh, haha, well, you know, the women, huh, thing, which it's like a self-affirming identity thing. She's done it a few times. Would we argue then, like, okay, well, that is also, like, you're gonna, like this is misogyny that's amplifying the worst elements of the movement?
He called her fragile and described her critique as random drama before pumping up his own ability to deal with blowback on social media, with no awareness that the way people would attack a man will of course be less damaging than the attacks against a trans woman. Come the fuck on, dude.
She's so fragile. Yeah, well, the thing that bothers me is that Contra knows how much tactics like her own hurt people. Contra's literally been, like, driven to, like, opiate addiction, relapsing, and alcoholism because of the behavior of Twitter woke scolds. I would expect her of anybody to be really sympathetic to how, like, I don't know, damaging it can be to do, like, really random drama id-pull attacks for no reason other than to, like, from, like, that kind of stuff, you know? It's not really as much of a risk for me because I'm obviously handle criticism better than she does.
And then he called her a crybaby while being a crybaby.
I guess I can't really be too mad about things. She makes one video a year, and every time she gets in trouble online, it destroys her emotional state. I just wish she would be more respectful of other people's emotional state, because even if it doesn't affect me as much, like, it's still bad to do, you know? There's nothing that I respect less more than the pithy crybaby abuse of people who have less tolerance for disagreement than you know? So because they're more easily hurt, they assume that, like, it's okay for them to hurt others, because in any direct engagement between them and others, they'll always be the one who, like, feels worse after, which was no doubt the case with me too. Otherwise, she wouldn't have spent a year simmering before releasing a response to drama that was a year old.
It blew me away that this is how he would respond to valid critique about an issue impacting trans people from a trans woman whose work has elevated the conversation for millions of others and has been extremely open about her challenges being a public figure and transitioning on YouTube. I was really disappointed that he would treat a creator I looked up to like this, but I was fucking enraged that he was bringing down the trans community as a whole with his inability to demonstrate humility in the face of such blatant punching down on that community.
Like, everyone hates you. Quit being selfish. You live in a community, in a society. I'm not joking. Quit being selfish.
A lot of people have negative perceptions of terms like ally, and Vaush is a perfect example of why. Many so-called allies, especially in the online communities, perpetuate antisocial behavior under the guise of helping progressive movements, when really they are focused on building up their own personal brands, and they don't give a shit who they step on to get there. Watching Vaush, a white man who built his career as a leftist progressive, excuse shitting on women because a trans woman does it, was so disappointing to me as someone who had consumed so much of his content. That's how my perspective of Vaush and people like him changed. From feeling like he was edgy and somewhat problematic, but an overall positive influence to the online space, to just another dude creating conflict for clout and money.
This frustration I have where other people treat me poorly, and then I go to my subreddit and you guys are like, well, hold on, Vaush really did fuck up here. And then I do a stream and I go over how I didn't fuck up, and then you guys change. You're like, oh, well, and usually it's because the person who criticized me is a woman or is trans or is black, and you're all more sympathetic to their perspective because years of lefty conditioning has made you all little bitches who automatically agree with arguments because the person who made them is from a minority group, like what Contra did when arguing with me, which is embarrassing. Now, as an addendum to all of this, I will simply say this was not a personal attack on anyone. I am very, very, very negatively disposed towards motorcycles and motorcyclists. I'm sorry, the community of motorcyclists in general is polluted with awful people. That is a fact. You are not innately bad because you ride X or Y or whatever. I just have, 20 years of memories in LA of cars driving back and forth like at a moderate volume outside of my family's house, and that every once in a while you hear the deafening roar of a motorcyclist like 2,000 feet away because they just decided to do that. They would do it at like 11 p.m. or something, and that was like pretty common,
Let me close out this video by first sincerely thanking Vaush, because although I've made shorts around several arguments in this video, I've wanted to put it all together for people in one place for years, but I just struggled to find the right jumping off point for that conversation. It's not easy to expose the systems underneath society to everyday people when they're trained to blame individuals for systemic problems. And it's even harder to connect that to their day-to-day struggles. But I think Americans are beginning to wake up to the reality that the deck is stacked against us. And so if we want things to get better, we need to be thinking bigger. It took me over 30 years to realize that the people I'd entrusted with building the traffic management system are too corrupt or ignorant to admit the nightmare of a future they're constructing for all of us, and that I needed to start connecting with other people in order to fix it. But to connect with people, you need to empathize with them, because that's what allows you to see common ground as well as the points of contention. You'll never agree with anyone 100% on every issue, and we all have finite time and energy to fight for what we believe in. So you gotta choose your battles. This video wasn't a battle worth my time until Vaush said a bunch of silly things about motorcycles.
But fuck motorcyclists.
Then it became the perfect vehicle to educate people on what's most important to me, teaching people how to live a happier, more fulfilled life through motorcycles and community. I'm a firm believer in the principles of restorative justice, and Vaush lives in the same Seattle community as me, so I am happy to forgive and move forward if he wants to work on himself and do better. When I talked about making this video in my Discord, people were super concerned that I was looking to pull out of context clips and attack him in bad faith, which is something that has definitely happened to him and every other person in the debate sphere.
people will say anything when they don't like you. That's why you can't take them seriously, you know? You have to realize that if people dislike you, if they really dislike you, and there's just a general, like, I don't know, air of dislike towards you, like, they can just say whatever. There's no relationship between reality and what they say, right? You can't get, you can't, like, self-evaluate from people who irrationally hate you. That's just silly.
I feel like I have accurately represented Vaush's statements and provided all of the relevant context. But to make sure he doesn't feel that way, and because I think it's only fair, given that I provided him feedback on my platform of choice, that I give him the opportunity to provide me feedback on his platform of choice.
All video essayists despise the concept of debate because they're bad at it.
As a token of good faith, I am willing to invest in Vaush's growth by arranging a time to meet up with him around the Seattle area somewhere, and I will teach him to ride a motorcycle on my motorcycle. Not this one, my stunt bike. Are you fucking kidding me? What I've learned from years of experience is that the easiest way to assuage anyone's concerns about motorcycles is just to put them on one. Obviously, I speak for nobody but myself, and I do think he owes a lot of people apologies. ContraPoints would definitely be one. Professor Flowers would be another, but my forgiveness is not contingent on repairing those relationships. I'm a pretty easy dude to get along with, so I'm happy to be a starting point in case he wants to show other people that he's serious about squashing beefs. I would if I was him, because the older I get, the more I realize it's hard to build deeply fulfilling horizontal relationships devoid of power imbalances with other people. So when I meet someone I connect with on my core values like ContraPoints, I would bury my pride so fucking fast to save that relationship. Vaush changing is not up to me. He doesn't even need to acknowledge this video, and he could choose to shit on it, just like he did with Contras. We'll see what happens. Motorcycles are a pragmatic and utilitarian decision that lets responsible people take ownership of their safety. They're also fun as hell. If you're trying to tell me to stop sharing lanes, ripping wheelies, using bike paths, merging late, borrowing sidewalks, dragging knee, riding fast, and taking chances, I can tell you right now, I ain't gonna change.
You can legally speed if Freebird is on. That's true.